As I said at the start of the show, there's just so many amazing stories breaking. I wanted to focus, of course, on the FBI story that what came out last night, Wednesday night in Washington, was the unsealing of some of the information that should have been turned over to Lieutenant General Michael Flynn's attorney, Sidney Powell, should have been turned over a long time ago, withheld, hidden by the highest level of officials at the FBI, at the Department of Justice, apparently in some major law firms in Washington, D.C., information withheld, and only finally because of the incredible tenacity of Sidney Powell, her determination to insist that the truth get out, do we finally have a release just last night of the information that she and the Lieutenant General Michael Flynn should have had from the start, release of documents that just, they are almost dispositive in proving that Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was set up by the FBI because of their ongoing disdain for President Trump. First, I want to ask, before I get into this story about Michael Flynn and the amazing things that came out last night in Washington, I want to ask Matt, the wonderful producer, who is so great to be producing my show from his home. I'm doing my show from my home. I want to ask Matt to play. There was a very short tweet, like a 12-second tweet, what that Lieutenant General Michael Flynn put out. I want to ask Matt to play that, and then we'll come right back and I'll tell you what was so astonishing about what came out. If we have that tweet, Matt. And that, my friends, is the whole tweet right there. That is what Lieutenant General Michael Flynn put out as a tweet. President Trump retweeted. But I want to tell you what is so staggering, shocking, and simply just, it's almost, if this were something that would in some way help the Democrat effort in this country, help the left wing, the leftists, the socialists in this country, you'd have every media outlet in this country screaming from the rooftops all day long, today and for months to come. But in a moment, I'll tell you why and tell you the numbers. Nobody's talking about this on the left because it so undermines their entire effort. What was released last night in response to the ongoing efforts of the Sidney Powell and Lieutenant General Michael Flynn legal effort was ordered release of handwritten notes by an FBI official, the FBI official being William Priestap, who is now retired. He's the former assistant director for counterintelligence. He was the ultimate supervisor over Peter Strzok, who really led the Russia probe. In these handwritten notes, these all relate to the meeting that the FBI set up to interview Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who for a very brief time was President Trump's national security advisor. For, I think it was a week or 2 weeks, the most shortest lived national security advisor. But these FBI people were talking about their plan to go interview Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. So the handwriting, the notes that came out, again, from William Priestap, at the time FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence, was writing notes about the interview of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Here's what he wrote. What is our goal? Truth / admission, or to get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired? The notes further express concern the FBI might be playing games with the interview with Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. So these are notes. This is the FBI conspiring, orchestrating, trying to decide in what way are we going to torture this guy who is the president's national security advisor. Let me put a comma there before I get to the rest of the amazing things released. It is reported that in the famous ride in the limousine between the White House and the inauguration for President Trump in January 2017. So Obama, outgoing president, in the limousine with Trump on the way to the inauguration, it is reported very credibly that President Obama said to President Trump, or outgoing Obama said to President Trump, you need to get rid of Flynn. You need to get rid of Flynn. And that, I mean, of all the people and everything he could have talked about, Flynn made Obama so nervous, so upset that that's who Obama chose to talk about. And to be really clear, if you don't recall this about Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, he's a Democrat, shockingly. He's a Democrat. But he did not agree with President Obama about the threat of Islamic terror. Flynn, in fact, that's when I had him on my show, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, before he was even in the Trump administration, and on when I used to have a show on Salem Radio, had him on talking about the threat of Islamic terror. This drove President Obama nuts, that he had a Democrat in the military, high ranking, who was warning him about Islam. But back to where we are. So here we have released last night in Washington in connection with the ongoing prosecution of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. It's also important to understand who is implicated by all of what was uncovered. So you have, first of all, Priestap writing notes. And obviously, it appears he was writing notes following a meeting with McCabe in which they're discussing what are we going to do with this guy Flynn. So first of all, he's saying, well, what's our goal here? I don't know. Are we trying to get the truth? Are we just trying to force an admission? Are we trying to get him fired so we can prosecute him? What is it? So they're questioning what they ought to be doing with this. Secondly, there is Sidney Powell has now characterized this. Sidney Powell was on numerous media outlets last night. She was on my show last week, I think. So you could look back and see that interview because she knew a lot of this was coming. She's read this situation better than most attorneys in Washington. She knew it was coming. But she has characterized the way the FBI treated Lieutenant General Michael Flynn as he was framed, and also that there is her statements last night in media included more is going to be produced. She's seen all this stuff that's been turned over and not yet released, and she's saying even more things, even more shocking, are coming. Other things, amazingly, that were in this release. One was in the email chain. There are emails between Lisa Page, the FBI lawyer, and Peter Strzok, her sweetheart, her lover, who is also heading up this whole investigation, an email chain in which they're discussing at what point, whether and when they have to give it's a 1001 warning, a 1001 warning. It's the warning that the FBI gives to people to say, hey, of course, you do understand anything we say can be used in a prosecution. It's essentially the warning, you shouldn't lie to the FBI because we could prosecute you for that. So she's got this coy email exchange back and forth with Peter Strzok, her sweetheart, and who's heading it up. And she actually says in there, is there any rule about when we have to say this? I mean, can you give the warning to Lieutenant General Michael Flynn? Can you give him the warning when you are, at the beginning? Do you have to give it in the beginning? Do you have to wait till the middle where he may say something that's problematic? And then if he says something then that's problematic, then maybe you can, then maybe slip it in then. But the point is, she's cagey. She's engaging in how can we dupe this guy into saying what we want him to say, because she uses the language. It seems to be, if it's the former, which is, can you say it in the beginning kind of casually as though you're not really responding to something he said. She's urging, can you throw it in casually in the beginning besides, hey, how are you? Great to see you. Thanks for meeting us. By the way, anything can say maybe prosecutable. She's saying it seems to be if the former, which is referring to the permission to say it in the beginning, then it would be an easy way to just casually slip that in. Of course, sir, federal law makes it a crime, ... She's urging these people who are going to be doing the interview to essentially encourage the person they're interviewing, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, to not be alarmed, to not be worried, just try to, hey, get him relaxed, yeah. So we're concocting this as a way to get this guy. And so we're cagily playing games with the idea of whether and when we should do anything to tell him, or warn him that he might be actually the subject of our interview. It's a different thing when the FBI, if you're the subject, if they know they're interviewing you because they're thinking about prosecuting you, they have to give you a warning. Of course, you realize, anything you say could be used against you. You could be prosecuted. It's illegal to lie to the FBI. Even if you're not sworn under penalty of perjury, it's illegal to lie to the FBI. She's urging them to play games. The last thing, speaking of playing games, at Prestep, who is, again, the one who wrote the note in the beginning saying, hey, what are we doing here, guys? What's our plan? He actually wrote in there, I agreed yesterday, he's referring to meetings he had. I agreed yesterday that we shouldn't show Flynn, and then whatever it is redacted. There was some discussion whether to show him something. People assume it was the transcript of the conversation he, Flynn, was having with the Russian official, which was the purported reason that he was being interviewed. And they were saying, should we show him this so he knows we have it before we question him? He said, I agreed yesterday we shouldn't show it if he didn't admit it, but I thought last night, I think we should rethink it. And then he says, if we're seen as playing games, the White House will be furious. Protect our institution by not playing games. So he's acknowledging that they're going to be seen as playing games because they're trying to set up Flynn, this interview, in a variety of ways that cause him, Flynn, to eventually be able to cause them to be able to prosecute him, which is, of course, the entire point that they were up to start with. So this is a blockbuster, breaking, proving the point. I mean, I don't know how what they're gonna do about this inside the Department of Justice. I'm sure that they're all lawyering up and figure out who else they can blame. But I'll tell you something interesting. Ronna McDaniel tweeted this yesterday. So this is like the most breathtaking vindication of Flynn, proof that the FBI was setting him up, trying to find a basis to prosecute him, obviously trying ultimately, because they don't really care about Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. They care about destroying Trump. Ultimately, many of the things that the FBI did were to get to people like Flynn, close to Trump, who could possibly turn on Trump, which is what they ultimately really wanted to have. And actually, the entire prosecution, or the allegation about his conversation, Flynn's conversation with the Russian guy, was a alleged violation of the Logan Act. You can't, certain conversations you can't have with foreign officials. No one's ever been prosecuted under it ever. But they were setting him up as threatening that kind of prosecution. Another big thing that was in this, before I get to Ronna McDaniel, another big kind of revelation that came out of this all last night was that when Flynn agreed to plead guilty, he had been, at this point, he's been destroyed. He's had to sell his home because he can't pay his bills. He can't pay his mortgage. They're threatening to prosecute his adult son, also on completely false, pretentious reasons, on pretense, on false charges. But you're a guy, you've lost everything. You've lost your home. Your reputation's ruined, and you're facing jail. And so you're being offered if you plead guilty to this, we probably won't have to send you to jail, and we'll leave your son alone too. The reference in the discussion, what also came out last night was a reference in the discussion that was part of the deal, the arm twisting at the end that got Flynn to plead guilty was as, hey, by the way, we promise we won't go after your son. People, the corruption inside the FBI, the Department of Justice, what we're talking about right now is one little piece of it. It's how they treated Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. It's just how they treated him. It's how they were conspiring inside the FBI, DOJ. What are we going to do with this guy? How are we trying to get him? What do you think? I don't want to make the White House mad. We can't be. I mean, these are just people out to get him. But you have to see this particular revelation. This what came out in the context, in the backdrop of what had been happening inside the FBI and DOJ for the previous 2 years. What we now know, and they knew at the time, all these characters knew at the time, but we didn't. You had the FBI getting FISA court warrants against people based on a farce, based on a dossier that was mainly a campaign smear job paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign and later by the DNC, and using that filled with nothing but garbage. The Inspector General says there's nothing in here that was corroborated. Nothing, none of this is true. But the FBI used it to get FISA court warrants to get President Trump because they want to spy on his campaign before the election. So candidate Trump, spy on President Trump after elected. These people were out to get him. And what I really want to get at is this is not just about Obama versus Trump. It's not about the corrupt Obama administration, the corrupt Obama FBI and DOJ. It's not just about that. It's actually far deeper than that. It's about the notion if we have a law enforcement function in this country that we are supposed to have based on the Constitution, based on the idea that in America, we actually have a rule of law, and the rule of law must always apply. No federal agency is supposed to be doing their business, conducting their function with a political agenda to help the incumbent administration and to attack the incumbent administration's opponents. They're not supposed to be political. You're not supposed to be, because you're inside the FBI or the DOJ and Obama happens to be present, on board with the Obama agenda to destroy your political opponent. But they were. This is corruption, as Bill Barr has correctly called this, the biggest, Attorney General Barr has correctly called this, the biggest scandal in American history. And the little piece we're seeing right now, the little piece we're seeing that the FBI finally produced more documents and even more things are coming, according to Sidney Powell next week. They were conspiring to destroy this man, trying to decide which way they were going to destroy him. And this is January 2017. This is after all that they had done with the FISA court warrants and the spying on innocent people who happened to be affiliated with the Trump campaign. And this is, at its core, is why I say it's not just Obama versus Trump. This is America or not America. You have Trump and America and the rule of law, and you have the radical left-wing Obama administration and the complete corruption of the FBI and DOJ and the Department of State, other federal agencies, all corrupted by 8 years of Obama, implanting people in those agencies with his goal to fundamentally transform America away from a country rooted in the rule of law and individual liberty into a country rooted in a government-controlled society. What Obama was about was the most evil destruction of the idea of freedom in this country. And this is just one of the outcomes, one of the ways in which the Obama agenda was manifested through the DOJ, through the FBI, is we're going to get this guy Flynn. He doesn't see it coming. He thinks it's a friendly interview, and we're going to get him. This is why this story is so important, not just because it will ultimately lead, I hope, and I actually assume that all charges will be dropped. That is the minimum step that has to happen. All charges dropped. In fact, I think the trial judge is going to give the DOJ the option to say, would you like to drop all the charges yourself, or do I need to dismiss all charges? Your choice. He may give the DOJ that option. But either way, there should be a lawsuit by Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, because you can actually bring a civil liability lawsuit when there has been the corruption of a government function, as you have seen here. So you have that potential. There also need to be investigation of every single person involved in this chain of the documents and what and getting every last bit of document out. There needs to be investigation, criminal prosecution, jail time for a growing list of people inside the DOJ and the FBI. We mentioned them all on the show before. That's what needs to happen, because if we don't truly completely, deeply clean this out. You're not just cleaning out the FBI and DOJ of individual actors who behave badly. You're cleaning out the mindset. You're cleaning out the culture of corruption that invaded the DOJ and FBI under President Obama, that made them think it was okay to go after innocent Americans, because the larger agenda, of course, is being served because we're destroying the enemies of the Obama takeover America, the left-wing takeover America. These people were about destroying Trump because he was going to be bringing America back to being America, because he wasn't going to play along with the Obama administration attempted destruction of America. It is that important that every single player involved, and that the public, every single player involved is prosecuted, and the public understands the depth of the corruption that happened inside the FBI under the Obama administration. One last point, and I'm going to get off this story, but this is huge, and it's huge. And when I tell you the following data about how it's getting reported, it'll make you realize how huge it is. So Ronna McDaniel, the head of the RNC, GOP chairwoman, tweeted out yesterday, this is a massive story about the FBI malfeasance at the very beginning of the Trump administration. How many times did the mainstream media mention it during their morning shows? This is her tweet today. CNN mentioned it 0 times, CBS 0, ABC 0, NBC 0, MSNBC 0. Biggest story, proof of the entire point that the Lieutenant General Michael Flynn team has been making and that Sidney Powell's been making. He was persecuted by political opponents. He was used. He was framed. This is astonishing evidence, more coming. And the left-wing media can't even think of a reason to even tell their listeners about the story. Much more to come on this, but so important if you understand there's the depth of how important this story is.